Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play the Game Gear Shinobi for the Game Gear, whatever you want to call it. In the last part we started off the game and beat all 4 of the main stages, and now it's time for Neo City, the final stage of the game. Before we talk about the stage itself, let's talk about the green Shinobi, my favorite Shinobi in the game. They've got a double jump you do by pressing the jump button again at the apex of the jump. They throw shurikens as their ability, and similarly to the shurikens in the main Shinobi games, if you throw shurikens in the double jump, you throw a spread of 5. With that said, don't use Green's ninjutsu, because Green's ninjutsu is the Mijin technique from the mainline games, where you sacrifice a life. But not only do you sacrifice a life, it also uses any and all of your tech ammo, so it's a literal last resort. And I should note, if you use it when you have no lives left, it is a game over. So be careful. With that said, welcome to Neo City, the worst stage in the game. This is the only stage in this part, and yet it's almost the same length as the last one for a reason. The stage is long, and it's tedious. Also, this is Blue's ninjutsu. You turn into a tornado and go swah 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 and can move in any direction. Hey, it's the boss from the last stage. Neo City is built up of, I think, like 24 unique challenge rooms that all interlink to each other in some regard that's super complicated. And we need to go through as many rooms as we can in order to reach the final boss. With that said, along the way, you are guaranteed to fight at least 3 of the previous bosses over again. I used to think you needed to fight all 4 on my first test playthrough, but on looking stuff up and doing further test playthroughs, no, you just need to fight 3. You can fight all 4, but you don't have to. By and large, the challenges in here range from just straight up platforming, knowing what the ninjutsu of a specific team member does, or things of that nature. You can generally get an idea of which ninja you're supposed to use, though, depending on the color of the background, as they do tend to color code the rooms based off that alone. For instance, this room we need to use Blue's chain whip to swing around, so use Blue to swing around. This stage is comparatively a marathon to every stage in the game, because by and large, the other stages are maybe 5 to 6 minutes in length. I'd say on my first playthrough, this stage was nearly 40 damn minutes. Partially because it's possible to loop back into the same rooms over and over again. It's just not fun. If you're looking for an exact walkthrough, just follow exactly what I'm doing and where I'm going, because to be frank, it's what I'm aware of as the shortest path. There might be another path that's about as short, honestly, but I can't tell if I'm thinking of the second game, because the second game's final stage is similar, albeit much better executed. Now, I should note, one of my favorite parts about this game, because of course it would be, is the music. This is done by the same composer as many of the previous games, Yuzo Koshiro. And there is, thankfully, a sound test if you want to just hear the music and not play the game. To do that, you just need to, hold up and then press start on the title screen. My best advice for this stage is make sure you open every box you can along the way, because especially if it's a room that requires you to use a ninjutsu technique in order to not commit to die, there is usually a tech point hidden somewhere in there. Also, this room's super long, so I'm just fast forwarding it the second time through so we don't have to sit for here for another extra minute and a half. In a way, this stage is super ambitious for the hardware it's on, given not many games attempted to be Metroid-like, from my knowledge, on the Game Gear. There was really just this, the second game, Tails Adventure. What else? I guess Sylvan Tale, because of how much of an adventure game that honestly was by the end of the game. But there just wasn't much on the system that tried to do this. And I feel the best thing they could have done to help with it is if every stage also had a map function you could access through the menu. Even if it was just these rooms loop around back to these rooms. Sort of like if it was the map from The Great Maze in Subspace Emissary. it would have been much easier to handle. Although, with that said, seeing this room, there's also just some rooms in here that are outright awful to play. The precision you need here in order to do jump shurikens into these constantly blocking monk enemies is, absurd. I hate that room. I forget if that's one we need to do once or twice, though, if you're going the path I am. There's definitely a few you need to do twice. Namely, a lot of rooms that coincidentally use blue for one reason or another. Don't know if that was intentional. This is potentially one of the harder to figure out rooms on a first playthrough. What you need to do here is cling to the ceiling as Pink can just glide right over these spike ball enemies without a worry. If you want to refight the helicopter boss fight, by the way, I believe it's in the room, the door on the left side of the room here that we can go into, not the one on the right. This is the way towards, let's see, we fought Monkey Mech, we fought Face. This is the pathway that leads to Ninja. Now, I should note, like many games of the generation really did, in the manual, there are also descriptions for each of the stages. But not like some other games, they just give a general overview. No, I'm talking they have straight up descriptions for each of the individual pieces of a stage. For instance, in the highway, there's carefully leap across speeding cars and trucks as you dodge bullets and masked hackers for the first part. And the second part is arrows rain down and men with massive hammers run after you as you climb up towering buildings. I think I didn't mention it, but I think one of the other Shinobi games we've done thus far had that as well, and I'm honestly impressed they went to that much effort. Because there's even one for the boss fight. For instance, technically the boss one is called the Crazed Chopper. The one in the valley is the sword-wielding foe. That is not a sword. That is a scythe of some sort. Scrap the robot, rescue yellow. Mask of death, green will be freed. There is notably a score system in this game, by the way. With that said, I don't think it does anything besides bragging rights. Because I don't recall ever getting an extra life from players from points alone, but just looking at my lives, that's clearly potentially not the case, so I'm assuming it's maybe every 10,000 maybe you get a life? That's all I can think about with the amount of points I currently have. Red's ninjutsu, by and large, is probably my least favorite in the game because they really make you spam this spell in this final stage, no matter what path you go on, because I think this is the path you need to go on to reach the final boss anyway at this point. So, yeah, that sucks. Something I was trying to find, and I should try again right now while I'm talking. I don't even think there's a map of this stage out here on the internet compared to certain other things like the Revenge of the Shinobi final stage's Labyrinth. So finding your way around this stage is easily the worst part of the game. Like I said, you can be in here for upwards of an hour if you're just having trouble finding your way around. In fact, more than likely you'll stumble your way to the final boss. And I don't even think the bosses gain any extra health in this phase, nor do they do extra damage. I think it's just straight up, hey, you want to fight these bosses again? We needed to pad the game out length somehow. I'm sorry, did I just completely mess up like the last half of that sentence? I think I did. It's funny. That kind of shit happens to me a lot, but sometimes I won't notice it until after I've already uploaded the video. And I don't know how, because sometimes the verbal mess-ups I make are notable. It's not like anything like offensive, thankfully. It's usually just the word order is completely wrong. And maybe I'll make up a grammar term of a word that has not existed before. But it's like, Jesus Christ me. Get the words through your brain, the better. By and large, I think the stage order I went through in this LP is probably the friendliest to new players. The only real downside is you don't really get chances to use green much, and it's a shame because I love double jumps in platformers. Also, I should note, in this game and Game Gear Shinobi 2, so I'll bring this up when we get to that next, When it comes to Yellow's ability to walk on water, he can only walk on the surface. So, for instance, with those water spouts we've seen throughout this entire stage, he can only stand on, I think it's called the crest of the water, wherever there's white splashy bits. Wherever there's blue, you can't stand, only stand on the white, because it's the only part you can stand on just straight up. By and large, I do appreciate the fact there's a little cutscene for you using the ninjutsu here, because it's easily the most graphically impressive thing for the game. Although, by and large, this game isn't bad looking for Game Gear standards, honestly. From my memory, at least, the Sega first-party games on the handheld looked pretty good. Sylvan Tale looked fantastic for the Game Gear. Sonic Labyrinth did. We don't talk about Sonic Spinball. That's probably the worst-looking Sonic game on the system. In fact, you know what? Let me scroll through the games I have on Game Gear really quick to see if I can even remark one that looks just straight up awful. The only reason I'm really going on this little tangent is we're going through this stage design again. Let's see. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Game Gear movie. Yeah, that looked good, even though I don't think it played the best. Crystal Warriors wasn't too impressive looking, but that's also basically just Baby's first Fire Emblem. Same with, I think, the Shining Force game I have on here. More or less, most of these aren't too bad looking. But again, I think Sylvan Tale is probably the best looking game I have for the system. Mind you, it's like, I think that was also a relatively late Game Gear game. Let's see. Game Gear 1995. That sounds late for that system because that was released, I think, in 90? Yeah, 90 in Japan. 91 US. Discontinued 97. Yeah, it's relatively late into the lifespan. By the way, these next few screens are the only ones where Pink's ninjutsu actively comes into play, because you need to use it in order to not only lower this water, which is instant kill if you get into it, by the way, you'll also want to use it to light up the next room, because it can also light up dark areas, and straight up freeze enemies in the second to last room. Thankfully, again, wherever you're about to need it, they do place a tech point, but still kind of annoying to have to go into the menu to use it over and over and over again. And I do find the way they do what I think, at least, the way they do the water interesting in this game. Because what I think they're doing is they're just flashing between, like, 3 different background sprites, or background layers. Like, the platforms in the water take up the same area, they're just flashing between them frame for frame. And, you know, for the hardware being as limited as it was, it's impressive. More or less. And time to start spamming that pink tech once again. The only tech you're not going to see, as I mentioned, is the yellow one last part, which is just straight up an invincibility mode that I think only yellow can use, so if you try to switch out of it, you'll just lose it. It's only really usable in areas where there's a lot of enemies in my eyes, though, because I don't even think it prevents you from getting instantly killed, because I should note, spikes in this game, though you're mostly seeing them in this stage only, are instant kill. So my Mega Man instincts are handy here. Also, the reason you want to freeze those enemies is they're basically landmines. If you get too close to them, they just take out the stage, and you're not able to do anything in that case. Either way, time for the final boss. This black ninja that tries to use all the abilities of the individual ninjas. Starting off, it's gonna head to the right side of the screen and fire a wave of projectiles that you can just duck under around this part of the screen. Then it'll try to jump over to you and either hit you with its chain, or eventually, if you do enough damage, it'll start just throwing waves of bombs at you from a double jump. The bombs are probably the harder attack to dodge here because they're just spread so unevenly. After enough damage, it does go into phase 2, though, where it's this giant metal beast, which looks like the villain from the second RoboCop movie that has 2 attacks. It'll fire bombs from its shoulders that you need to jump over horizontally because it causes waves across the screen, or it'll throw its crest at you like it's a boomerang, and it can hurt you on the way back as well, so be careful of that. It's definitely the hardest boss in the game, but if you've played the game even twice, I think it shouldn't give you too much trouble. On a first playthrough, how fast its attacks can come out can be troublesome, though. Neo City's going to self-destruct. Let's get out of here. And that's Shinobi for the Game Gear, or the Game Gear Shinobi, whichever you prefer. It's alright. I like the front half more than the back half, obviously, as I think the main 4 stages are honestly fun. I think each of the Shinobis having their own little abilities is really cool. I think the music's great. And again, for the system, this is a pretty good-looking game. But Neo City is such a tediously long and just super precision-oriented stage compared to the rest of it, that it just ruins the rest of the game for me. It is, by and large, I'd say, the second easiest Shinobi game we've done thus far. And the only game I think that's easier than it is the next game, because it takes what people criticized about this one and fixed it, more or less. If you want to play the game, it was on the Game Gear, of course. I think it was released on at least one of the virtual consoles. I think the 3DSs. So there's definitely ways you can play it, and I do, at least if you want to get into the series, recommend it enough for the first half. Just don't touch Neo City. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching. You have a great night. Take care. And I'll see you guys in the second Shinobi for Game Gear, otherwise titled the Game Gear Shinobi, the GG Shinobi 2. See you guys then.